So let's start with words. What are they? Why do languages have them? These are all good questions. Luckily for us, Eleanor Rosch figured it out in 1973 and refined her theory into what we now call prototype theory over a decade. What is prototype theory? In order to understand, let's return to our original question. Why do languages have words? Well, and I'm simplifying this, broadly each word represents a category. These categories are very complicated cognitive processes, but you can just think of it as a box. Stuff can go inside the box and stuff can go outside the box. For example, can you tell me what word this category represents? That's right, dog in very fashion. Good job, these are all dogs. I'm very impressed. In fact, I'm really impressed. How did you do that? No, seriously, how? Let's see what Eleanor Rosch has to say. Aha! It has to do with attributes. So our brains are really good pattern recognition machines. You've all been told that before, but our brains start recognizing objects based on the discontinuity of patterns, not the patterns themselves. Your brain doesn't just identify a leopard. First it identifies black spots on an orange surface. That's a pattern. Then it recognizes a different pattern, light blue splotches adorning a fibrous, rough brown texture. Your brain picks out the leopard from the tree based on the line between these patterns. Or it doesn't. You may have noticed this, but this leopard is camouflaged, which means it has evolved over millions of years to have similar patterns to the things around it. This means that it's hard for other animals, including humans, to draw the lines between them and their surroundings. This is also why, European oil painting can be so difficult. Our brains rely so heavily on these lines that do not exist that beginner painters struggle to paint without them. Drawings give us the lines we're used to, but paintings create these lines by mimicking reality directly, by juxtaposing patterns and colors and allowing the brain to identify the discontinuities between them. In reality, the discontinuities between patterns are probably much smaller than this leopard. Your brain might start off with a few of the spots juxtaposed against the orange background. The black fur itself is a pattern, and so is the orange fur. Your brain starts to build new patterns out of the discontinuities. All of these patterns are attributes, and categories in the brain have attributes. Confusingly, the attributes that we are aware of are also categories. We have a category for noses, but for the category leopard, a nose is an attribute. So keep in mind that categories have attributes. We'll need that later. Categorization is the most basic cognitive function. Our brains categorize so much that we don't even realize it. We likely don't have words for the vast majority of categories that exist in our brain. I promise I'll get back to the words in a bit, but before we go on, I think it's really nice to understand why our brains categorize the world according to Eleanor Rosch. She has two jargony terms here, cognitive economy and perceived world structure. I'll break them down for you. Cognitive economy means that our brains want to get the biggest bang for their buck. Categorizing every single thing we see would use an insane amount of energy, so our brains don't do it. They only categorize the most important things. Perceived world structure means that we perceive the world through categories, not raw sensory input. Imagine if our brains showed our consciousness unaltered visuals, just pure light information. I feel like I'm getting a headache just trying to imagine it. Together with cognitive economy, it makes perfect sense that we understand the world through categorization. It's just the most efficient way to do it. So finally, back to words. We have a bunch of categories in our head. At a certain point, it becomes useful to know what categories exist in another creature's head. This is where communication comes from, a desire to read minds. Many animals communicate with one another as a way of allowing the external to understand the internal. No animals do this as well as humans. Our brains are capable of a lot of cognition that other animals can't do as far as we know. Some of these cognitive abilities come up in Hackett's design features, a rigorous description of human language that contrasts it with other possible communication systems. But most relevant here is levels of categorization. Most animals don't benefit from understanding the difference between different cultivars of pears. A chimp will see a pear, identify it as a pear, and eat it, and therefore does not need a robust encyclopedic knowledge base. Likewise, most animals have no need to put concepts in abstracted categories. This leopard doesn't need to categorize the tree behind it and tall grass as in the same category, and therefore does not need the ability to use abstract thoughts. Over time, as humans evolved, we started to alter our environment more than other animals, making tools and clothing, shelters, and so on. As our environments and the way we interacted with them became more complex, so did our cognition. For example, understanding different types of thatching became paramount to creating thatched roofs. And abstractly understanding social structure helped groups of humans organize themselves more efficiently. Over millions of years, natural selection selected for these cognitive abilities, and all of these changes in categorization manifested in language. At least according to Győri. I think that was right. So now we know why humans have words and other animals don't really. Well, okay, there are some impressive videos of apes and pets using buttons to communicate, but their lexicons are very small and tailored to their needs. which are less complex than our needs. In the wild, the ways that non-human animals communicate often don't have recognizable words that we can compare to human words. So humans have words because we made our environments more complex, which made our cognition more complex, which made us able to make our environments more complex, so on. Great, but it doesn't stop there. Remember cognitive economy? Our brains want to be efficient. One way to do this is by changing the size of the category. So let's learn about the different levels of categorization. Again, I have explained this in a few past videos, but let's go again. Here's a hierarchy of animals. Cognitive linguists, including Rosch, put these words into these 3 categories, which is pretty funny because now we have categories for our categories, but let's go over the levels. Superordinate words convey a very wide range of objects and are very vague. A superordinate word does not give you much information about the thing you're talking about. The objects in a superordinate category also only share a few attributes between them. Like the only attributes I can think of between different places is that they are physical and things can be at them. Those are the 2 attributes shared between Antarctica and the Oval Office. Superordinate words likewise require abstract thought, something that, while not unique to humans, is something that we uniquely excel at. This is why it's no surprise that when we teach non-human animals human language, they struggle with superordinate words. Subordinate words are the exact opposite. They're specific, sometimes hyperspecific, sometimes only referring to a single object. These words give a lot of information about the objects they describe, and likewise have a very high amount of shared attributes. A lot of these attributes are not physical, but encyclopedic. Like when someone says Gaiwan, they're not just describing the physical shape of a Chinese tea brewing vessel, but also a history, method, material, and even a philosophy around the process of using that tea brewing vessel. Because of this reliance on encyclopedic knowledge, something that humans uniquely excel at, it's no surprise that non-human animals struggle with subordinate words as well. So what about the in-between? We call this category the basic category because these are the words that we use every day. This is where cognitive economy comes back. It's way easier to say my cat day to day than my Persian because we don't need to use encyclopedic knowledge. And it's way easier to say my cat day to day than my animal because we don't need to use abstract thought. This is the sweet spot. Basic level words are usually concrete terms with a moderate amount of shared sensory attributes. Like these birds are all birds, and we know this because they have beaks and wings and feathers and legs. All things we can see, no abstract thinking or encyclopedic knowledge required. So it's no surprise that non-human animals love these words. In fact, there's this one story about Coco the gorilla. She was taught the ASL sign for straw to refer to a drinking straw, but the meaning was too subordinate for her, so she used it to refer to other objects with a similar shape, including a radio antenna. This is the first piece of evidence that the basic category is easier cognitively than other categories. Another piece of evidence is semi-verbal disabled people, specifically children in this paper from 2008. Semi-verbal autistic children struggle more with non-basic categories. But perhaps the best piece of evidence that we have is this chart from James Tanaka and Marjorie Taylor. No relation, I think? It very clearly eyeliners that words outside of the basic category take 1/10 of a second longer to process. And that's not insignificant. The sentence, "Every summer my brother and I eat ice cream," can take less than 2 seconds to say. It's also interesting to me that experts recognize subordinate words as quickly as basic words, as long as they're in their field of study. This is, of course, not true for words outside of their field of study. But crucially, even for experts, superordinate words always take an extra 1/10 of a second to process. So Toki Pona, yeah? What is it? Most of my audience already knows, I think, but there may be new people here. If you already know, you can skip to the timestamp on screen. So I'll explain. Toki Pona is a constructed language. That means someone sat down and decided what words and what grammar would go into it. In the case of Toki Pona, years later, the language has grown past whatever its original design was and has evolved into a living language, spoken and used by people daily. Its usage is changing over time through everyday use, just like French. Sorry, French Academy. But why is Toki Pona relevant here? Well, Toki Pona only has around 130 words. Some people use a little more, some people use a little less, but it evens out around 130. This is obviously really unique. In fact, this is the single feature of Toki Pona that sets it apart from all other living languages, or perhaps all other languages with an official ISO code. Sorry, Aoi, better luck getting an ISO code next time. English, for any given speaker, may have a distribution of words that looks something like this in red, with an even amount of words in each category. Or perhaps the average English speaker knows some extra jargon related to their profession, and perhaps there are fewer superordinate words than basic words. I honestly don't know. It would be really hard to measure this, so let's just assume it's even, given that I would have trouble counting the number of words in each category. Toki Pona's distribution, which I've eyeballed for you, but is measurable, is here in blue. And okay, there are some uncommon or strange words over in the subordinate area, such as Argumentum, but those words are among the words that are used least in Toki Pona. You can actually go find out which words are used compared to others over time using Ilomuni, linked below. But anyway, note how almost all of the words in Toki Pona are superordinate. Remember that even experts took an extra tenth of a second to process superordinate words in their field of study. So, what happens when you teach someone a language with only superordinate words? Now, there are a few possibilities here, and I'll spoil it for you by telling you that I don't know the answer yet, because I haven't done the study, and I don't think it's possible to reasonably expect any possibility over the others. The first possibility is the least likely in my opinion, which is that a Toki Pona speaker will recognize superordinate words at the same speed that they recognize basic words. If this happened, I'd eat my kilt. The second possibility is that Toki Pona speakers are able to process Toki Pona words slightly more quickly than English words in the superordinate category. The implication of this would be pretty cool. Language can actually change cognition. It would probably be very minor, but it would be a measurable example of the weak Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. A possible explanation for this is that Toki Pona speakers don't process Toki Pona words as superordinate because superordinate words depend on basic categories most of the time, so Toki Pona words are sort of their own category. The third possibility is that Toki Pona speakers process Toki Pona words at the same speed that they process English superordinate words. While this could be explained by a lot of things, which I'll touch on in a second, this would be evidence that Toki Pona and language in general does not have any impact on cognition. Because if it did, this is where it would impact cognition, isn't it? Of course, we don't know, and we would need to do more research on other parts of cognition, which means either making and promoting new conlangs or finding conlangs that mess with aspects of cognition and then creating more experiment to test these things. Unfortunately, that's a lot of work. Testing this for Toki Pona speakers is relatively easy. We have like at least 1,000 speakers. This puts us, or I guess it puts me, in a unique position. This study is doable. I would like to do it. I actually have my own plans to do it under academic supervision, probably starting in early 2027 through an independent study at my college. We'll see if that happens. Let's talk about the design of the study. After a disclaimer page talking about the potential harm of participating in the study, which would be limited to eye strain and cognitive fatigue, and collecting consent from participants, there would be a trial round that would explain how to participate. It's simple. A word flashes on screen and 2 images, one on the left and one on the right, appear. As quickly as possible, the participant with fingers ready on the 1 and 2 keys of their computer would need to identify which image, the one on the left or the one on the right, is best described by the word. The word will probably appear above a dot in the center of the screen, and I'll ask participants to look directly at the dot for the duration of the experiment to prevent eye movement duration from impacting the results. The computer would record the duration between the word and images showing up on the screen and a button press. It will also record if the button press was correct, and it will associate it with the image and word. There would be a collection of words from every level of categorization and a collection of Toki Pona words. Each word will be associated with more than one correct image, and the incorrect image will be pulled from a set of images from the other words that don't overlap in meaning. There will also need to be a version of this experiment for non-Toki Pona speakers, which, oddly enough, may be harder for me to find for participating in the study. This version of the experiment will be the same, but will lack the Toki Pona words. This allows me to compare reaction times between speakers of Toki Pona and non-speakers of Toki Pona. In order to ensure that cognitive fatigue will not impact the results, the experiment will be split up into multiple parts, perhaps 4, 5, 6, 7, each with maybe 50 instances of a word coming up. In between, people can take a break for as long as they'd like and do something to rest their brain. The exact numbers here will depend a lot on the guidance I may get when I do this under guidance of a psychologist. I don't really know what the standard numbers are for this, and I've never really had guidance around conducting my own experimental research, so it will be a journey for me. I may also repeat the demo in Toki Pona halfway through to see if after using Toki Pona for a while, results change. It might also be beneficial to have individual trials have only Toki Pona words, only English words, or a mix of both, to see if that has any impact. But that might be too complex in scope, and give me data that is harder to analyze for someone like me who's never taken a stats class. Now let's talk about some pitfalls of the study and how I would overcome them. In order to ensure that test results are based on proficient speakers, I would include a proficiency screening, which would ask questions about how often they struggle or succeed when using the language in various situations. I might also include a reading comprehension test just to make sure. In a way, I'd kind of be designing a standardized way to measure Toki Pona proficiency, so a lot of thought would need to go into it. If people who falsely consider themselves proficient after only learning for like a week or two participate in the study, they will not have spoken the language long enough for it to have an effect on their cognition. This would corrupt the data, making findings harder to see. For this reason, one requirement I have is the ability to speak Toki Pona without a reliance on translating from a different language. Currently, if I want to say something in Hebrew, I need to decide what to say in English and then translate, if I know the words. I would not qualify for a Hebrew version of this study because my baseline cognition is using an English framework, not a Hebrew one. It is also taking me significant extra time to translate in my head before speaking, sometimes over a second, and sometimes even longer. Sometimes I even give up. The study would also suffer if there was no calibration for button press latency. Think playing a rhythm game. Some rhythm games don't let you do this, but games like Rhythm Doctor allow you to calibrate the amount of time it takes your computer to register a button press by having you press the button on the 7th beat multiple times in a row, and averaging the latency between them. Instead of using rhythm, which is a variable skill, I would probably test this by having participants press a button as soon as a circle shows up on screen. This not only accounts for the latency of the device, but the baseline latency of the individual taking the experiment, which would equalize the baselines across all participants participating all over the world, but mostly in North America and Europe. In the city I live in for most of the year, I know maybe half a dozen Toki Pona speakers maximum, so if I wanted to conduct this study offline throughout the year, my sample size would be very limited. Allowing the experiment to be accessed via internet worldwide would allow a much higher sample size. I considered setting this up in time for the in-person Toki Pona meetup in Nueva York this summer from June 19th to June 22nd, but unforeseen stressors, including a book published in my name written to harass me and a federal occupation in the city I live in, kinda took up a lot of my time, so it didn't pan out, and my sample size would have only been like a maximum of 40. Plus, I'm hosting the meetup, so I would already be busy enough. So, for these reasons, the experiment would have to be online, and calibration is both necessary and useful. Probably. I still need to sit down and talk this experiment through with a psychologist for guidance before I do anything. I also need to learn how to use these tools, which all require computer coding, which I'm not good at, so we'll see. Now, I did actually do some research for this video. If you're in Toki Pona spaces, this may have fallen through the cracks recently due to recent events, but I sent out a form for people to list the attributes of words of various categories. Here are the words. I've used brackets to show their subordination structure, which is a word I made up to explain what this image is showing. For example, a shoebox is a type of box, which is a type of container, and I also tested these two Toki Pona words, supa and poki. Why am I doing this? I'm measuring the level of categorization by measuring the attributes. Remember how subordinate words have the most attributes and superordinate words have the fewest attributes? We know this because of studies like this one by Eleanor, Rosch, and her colleagues, which did something similar by measuring the amount of attributes for only English words. These measurements actually helped refine our understanding of which words go in which category. Like, they were expecting tree to be a superordinate word, but it actually patterned with basic level category words. So my goal here is to collect quantitative data to support my claim that Toki Pona words are superordinate. And let me tell you, the results were wild. So for each word, I asked participants to list as many attributes as they could. I tried my best to explain what a list of attributes looked like using ketchup as an example, but I don't think I did a perfect job because I had to remove a lot of responses for having bad data. Some people tried to list attributes in Toki Pona, and I explicitly asked people to list attributes in English, so I needed to remove their responses. Some people only wrote 1 or 2 attributes for each word, which goes against the list as many attributes as you can objective, so I removed those as well. Some people left fields blank. And because I'm averaging data points to look at ratios, I had to remove those responses too. After I was finished, I was left with a sample size of 46, which, for my college, is really big for a survey. So a huge thank you goes out to everyone who filled out the form, even if I had to delete your responses. The willpower to participate in surveys in the Toki Pona community is incredible, and I'm thankful to be able to send out a form and have dozens of people fill it out. Like, my Tonsi usage form got 307 responses before I closed it, which is a number of responses so big that it's probably making any social science undergrads watching this video drool. So 46 is kind of unheard of, I think, especially with the language that probably has under 10,000 speakers. Thank you. Before we look at the results, let's look at some funny responses. I have 2. You can pause to read through them, but not only did both of these make me laugh out loud when I was sorting through the data, but they also highlighted something I didn't consider enough. Culture has a huge impact on encyclopedic knowledge, and the level of categorization of a word, or even the existence of the word itself, may be different across different people. And I sent this out to a lot of people. While 78% of people who filled out my form were native English speakers, I had no information about cultural background, and that's still 22% of participants who have a different native language. That can be significant. Given all of that, the results surprised me. Can you see the surprising part? Pause if you want the dopamine of figuring it out before I tell you. A gift from me to you. Then must thou what I give return again though. Here it is. The number of attributes of Toki Pona words and their corresponding English superordinate words match 1 to 1. When I first saw this, I was disappointed. Of course people would just copy and paste their text from Toki and put it in container, but when I actually went and checked to see if this was the case, I found that it was not. Only a third of the respondents had the same number of attributes for both supa and furniture, and none of them had the same list of attributes. When I looked at the attributes that people listed instead of the raw numbers of how many, I noticed a big difference between supa and furniture. The attributes listed for Toki Pona words were more abstract with regards to the shape and orientation of the object, like flat and horizontal and surface. For English, they were collectively vague, but the attributes themselves were more basic in category, like big and part of a room with a purpose. What's incredible to me is that even with all these differences, the average amount of attributes for both pairs, furniture and container, is the same. As in, supa and furniture have the same maximum number of attributes, and the same average number of attributes down to the decimal place. So my conclusion is that all Toki Pona words are superordinate. I mean, yeah, I did kind of already know that, but it's nice to be able to link people to evidence. That's this video, by the way. Instead of writing a paper or something, I made a YouTube video on my YouTube channel. That's pretty cool. Anyway, real quick, some of you might be looking at the numbers and saying, well, those averages are all pretty close together. How can you be so sure that they correspond with level of categorization? And to that, I'll say that for basic and subordinate words, a lot of respondents didn't bother repeating the attributes that are shared by the superordinate. For example, someone may list inside a building as an attribute for furniture, but not list it for chair or armchair. I did not account for this when tallying up the number of attributes, but if I did, which would take me an extra 4 hours probably, I would expect the averages for basic and subordinate categories to go up significantly. And of course, the subordinate category words would stay the same. Okay, so there's my little survey and its results. What's next? What further research? Well, I already said, I want to study reaction speeds of Toki Pona words. Skip to this timestamp to rewatch that section if you really want to. This research could have implications for Toki Pona, other conlangs, the field of conlanging in general, linguistic relativity, and cognitive science as a whole. It could also just reaffirm that language does not alter cognition, and disprove a possible cognitive benefit of learning Toki Pona. I think it's really weird that people talk about cognitive benefits that come from learning a language when there is no quantitative data on this. At best, it's just strange to me, but at worst, it's false advertising. Like in the first book published about Toki Pona by the creator of the language, there are a few claims unsubstantiated by evidence. Toki Pona leads to deeper insights and promotes mindfulness, but does it? If anything, I feel that sometimes Toki Pona can prevent deeper insights by making you avoid talking about complicated topics you may not know how to describe. Like no, Toki Pona speakers don't just say yan ike pona for bad friend, but they probably also don't think about what a bad friend is that much either. They just avoid thinking about it altogether most of the time, especially people who are not of a very high level of proficiency. I get the desire to market the language. I too would love for it to grow and thrive and have more speakers and learners. I love the rare moments when I run into a Toki Pona speaker and chat with them. I love how prevalent it's becoming in queer communities. But when we advertise based on cognitive benefits that we cannot substantiate, or even cognitive benefits that are not present or accessible to the majority of people who will ever try to learn the language, people will get upset when they find out that they were lied to. Or worse, they will lie to themselves. A very common and harmful so-called cognitive benefit of learning Toki Pona is that it can treat mental illness. Not only is there no evidence of this, but telling people this can cause them to put a lot of time into the language, hoping that it will do something that it can't for most people, potentially instead of pursuing professional help. I have encountered learners that I had to tell that Toki Pona cannot treat mental illness. Perhaps if one can say Toki Pona can help you process abstract thoughts faster and can link to my study, that could replace the Toki Pona can help with mental illness. Toki Pona is a lot of fun, and a lot of its speakers are really cool, so you can definitely find community in learning Toki Pona if that's what you need. As always, my sources are in the description, just this time they're formatted in APA. This video is my final capstone project for my unnamed undergraduate linguistics program, which I should meet all the requirements for once I get my grades back this summer. Thank you to my professors and friends who will keep anonymous, and thank you to the Toki Pona community, especially the hardworking people who help promote my survey and are propelling Toki Pona into the future with grace and measured actions. Thank you to my parents and my family for supporting me. This has been one hell of a journey. So if this is my final capstone project instead of a paper and I have Patreon supporters, do you think I should thank them too? Yeah, I think so. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. You motivate me to keep making videos. As always, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I might answer. Eat a good animal. Or is that not specific enough?